This conference will now be recorded.
So I think it's best that we look upon ourselves as a back-end payment processor,
Good
which
evening,
looks after.
everyone. I would like to welcome Dr. Sanjeev like WASME on board Executive Secretary. So welcome, sir.
Thanks, Megha. I, on behalf of our Honorable Secretary General Dr. G.P. Agrawal, very good afternoon to ladies and gentlemen. I, Dr. Sanjeev Naik, Executive Secretary of WASME, heartily welcome Ms. Amrita Chaudhary, who is the co-founder and director of GAIA, and Mr. Praveen Roy, Senior Advisor, WASME, for contributing his valuable and precious time to make available for live webinar on uncertain time, certain growth. My special thanks to Mr. Praveen Roy, Senior Advisor, WASME, for introducing Ms. Amrita Chaudhary. I also welcome all the dignitaries who have taken out valuable time to participate in this webinar. Let me introduce WASME, a global organization having member representatives in more than 100 countries, spearheading the cause and development and promotion of SMEs worldwide through policy advocacy, information dissemination, conferences, seminars, events, trainings, publications, network linkages, and many more. Since 1980, WASME has the consultative and observer status of United Nations. Now the topic is uncertain time and certain growth. So if this COVID-19 has already disrupted all business, including MSMEs, uncertainty is like the weather. It is always there, part of the atmosphere, and condition over which individuals and organizations, they do not have the control. The severity of uncertainty, like the severity of the weather, can rise and fall. Like that, the businesses are falling. At the moment, around the world, CEOs are operating under a series of severe uncertainty alerts to unlock growth in a continually changing market. Investment managers need the right strategy and right support from their operating model. New findings from analysts and industry experts about the main opportunities for growth in the asset management industry also. As this is the pandemic era, I'm not taking means going in details, because we have got a esteemed guest to discuss on the topic uncertain time and certain growth. Let me introduce the esteemed panelist, Ms. Amrita Chaudhary. She is the co-founder and director of GAIA, an IoT AI enterprise SaaS company providing insights as a service and service orchestration for smart sites and smart cities. GAIA solutions monitor approximately 19 million square feet of built urban infrastructure and 440 million square feet of urban city areas. GAIA has won multiple technology, innovation, and social impact awards, including Welcome Design in India, Microsoft Research, Frost and Sullivan, Quality Council of India, NASCOM Emerge 50, and Mayor of London, India Emerging 20. Amrita is a business strategist, engineer, and innovator. She brings a unique understanding of business growth, technology, digital spaces, and branding. Previously, Amrita served the president of DY Works Future Group, country head of Herculean South Asia, and associate director South Asia for Harvard Business School. Let me introduce the another panelist, Mr. Praveen Roy. Praveen is a senior entrepreneur, now is senior advisor WASME and co-founder Payment, a B2B fintech payments company, and has worked in government, public, MNC sector as VP, CTO, CIO, CEO, and Red Herring Asia Top 100 awardees for promising tech startup companies. In addition, Ravi sits on boards of several private, public, and industry organizations. I am handing over the to Mr. Prabhi Roy to put his thought on the topic and our conversation with Amrita Chaudhary. Mr. Roy, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjeev Layak. Good afternoon, participants. Good afternoon, Amrita. Thank Wasme and Mr. Agarwal and Sanjeev for giving a platform like this for young entrepreneurs in the small and medium business sector. Amrita needs no introduction, so I will cut straight to the chase and get to the point. Amrita, how has your journey been as an entrepreneur? Because you have a lot of accomplishments to your name, you have a good corporate profile. So what made you throw up this all up and then enter the rugged and cruel and merciless world of being an entrepreneur? Did you hear, Amrita, did you hear what I said?
Kabir,
Hello?
I'm back again.
Okay,
I'm back again. Yes.
okay, it doesn't matter. It's part of the new job description. So what I was asking you, Amrita, is that how has your journey been as an entrepreneur? You have a lot of accomplishments to your name, a very good corporate profile. So what made you want to throw all this up and enter the rugged world of entrepreneurship?
So it's rugged, Pradeep, but it's also exciting. As a company, Gaia, we completed 5 years this year. And I've always, though I have worked in the corporate environment, I've always been a builder and a creator. So my first job was in innovation and in product development, and it goes back like a little bit in history, but the first Pentium 2 and Pentium 4 chips that had come out, so Intel had designed the chips, but I and my company, Applied Materials, had worked on creating the process, the production process that actually made it happen, right? So I got a few US patents out of that, initial work, and that sort of set me on a lifetime mindset of doing things which are changing and transformational, rather than things which are sort of repetitive, right? So even in business, I have been what you would call an intrapreneur, in the sense that while funding was secure from either the Indian or the global corporate entity. Like, I have been building businesses and product lines and so on. So when I got a chance, with my co-founders to look at this whole new area of connecting spaces and creating like a smart operations platform, which allows us to bring data from multiple ways and to bring visibility and to improve efficiency, operations, orchestration, all of that. That's when it was actually quite exciting to join with forces with them. I mean, I come in more as the business person on the team. The other members of my team are experts in technology transformation, product design, right? So I came in more as somebody who brought in the business and the marketing experience into the team, and it's been a lot of fun.
I like the way you said about Pentium chips. I think people like us, Pentium used to be the staple diet for whether it was a desktop or a laptop in the late 90s and 80s, especially the 386, 486, 586.
People will not know about
it. But yeah, and the participants will be pleased to know that Amrita is very humble. She has 7 patents in semiconductors to her name. So that is a very credible achievement. Just quickly go on, Amrita. I mean, I was just looking at your company profile, and it seems to have a lot of interesting and eclectic products and solutions for the enterprise sector, for utilities, and even maybe for small, medium businesses. So as a company, are you a product company or a platform company or a services business, or are you something else? And can you also give a few examples of how exactly you are, what kind of solutions are you providing, and how did you crack the marketing strategy to enter with IoT this Indian market, and has that worked for you so far?
Sure. So that was many questions rolled into one, Probir. So let me unpack it one by one. So at our core, what we would we are a a SaaS platform company. So we have a hardware and software solution which we are taking to market, and that solution is horizontal because we are looking at operations of connected places and connected workforces. So when I say horizontal, it means that we can cut across industries because I'm looking at just the operational part of managing places and people. So from commercial real estate to public infrastructure to transportation to warehouse and logistics to we do have clients in the SMB sector, and SMB is a categorization, right? But within SMB there are many different areas where our solutions can fit in. And the whole idea is that how do you manage your operations, the space and the people operations of your office, factory, building, location, multiple locations sometimes, and sometimes in a single large location. How do you manage it seamlessly? How do you manage it digitally? How do you manage it in a remote way? And how do you make it contactless? Right? And these were things that we were doing even before COVID. And I think right now it's something that emerges as something very unique and required. What we have realized is that we've evolved. So we started out initially in the initial years only as IoT and insights as a service, and then we realized very quickly that for us to be more valuable to our customers, it's not that they need just data. They need to know what to do with the data and how to optimize or improve the operations, right? So which means that I need to our system and our product needed to evolve to understand and bring in data from other systems, bring in data from sensors, bring in data from users, blend all of that to derive insights, identify issues, events. When I say events, we mean disruptions, and as disruptions happen, trigger the next set of workflows so that the operations is managed smoothly, right? So it's been a journey of realization that if we progress along this path of taking our product and solution and creating an end-to-end managed service around it, is how we can scale and grow. And that's really been the way forward. And you asked about market entry. So we are, at the end of the day, we are a B2B company, right? So my clients are all businesses, because I'm helping my businesses, helping these businesses streamline their operations. So I'll give you 2 or 3 different examples. So for example, Amul and DHL, all of their warehouses, whether company owned or franchisee managed, we monitor them nationally, right? And we ensure that product safety is the outcome that they want. And by monitoring the warehouses, we're able to inform and alert them and trigger the next set of workflows of how to manage those sites. We have hospitals, multiple large format hospitals across cities, in Mumbai, in Chennai, in Raipur, in Delhi, where we are looking at the operations management side of hospitals, because at the there is a medical side, and then the hospital itself is a facility where you have people, you have equipment, you have staff, non-clinical staff, support staff, and assets, equipment. All of that needs to be tracked, managed. So we are helping do that. So these are all, and examples are there in transportation, so transportation, again, when you're looking at transportation, there is a people movement part, but then those people are providing a service. So how do you manage the space and the people who are actually providing you transport? So we're doing that for Indian Railways. Different clients, again, very focused solution around the operations management of those businesses.
Yeah.
Using technology.
So, yeah, that's it's good that to know that you're in some of these sectors which are very important, was logistics, transportation, and public health, which is really the talk of the day. But how are your clients coping with post-pandemic? Are they able to bounce back, and are you getting a feel that there is more to do in that space, because they will look for operational efficiencies and more systemized workflows? Or have you had to slightly change and adapt to new requirements? If you can just tell us how any critical decisions you may have had to take in the last few months to adapt or adjust, or cope with new demands.
Sure. So I think one thing that is emerging out of the whole pandemic is that people want remote and contactless as much as possible, right? And there is also 2 very competing pressures that we are seeing. One is that the operation needs to be managed at a much higher level of health, safety, and standards for the place itself and for the people who are operating the space, right? And at the same time, there is a shortage of people, and the shortage of people is arising from a variety of reasons. Due to social distancing, fewer people are allowed to manage a site. Due to cost pressures, they want fewer people there at any given point of time. And also there is generally a shortage of staff, right? The last mile frontline staff, there is a shortage of it. So what it means for a lot of our clients is that performance needs to improve, and the people who are managing this performance need to be more effective and efficient, right? And the only way to do that is to bring in digital transformation and the kinds of solutions that we bring in, right? So where we are seeing a lot of interest and demand is that it's not just an Indian problem, it is a global problem right now. And this whole digital transformation has been something that we've been talking about for a while, but the lens today with which people are viewing it and seeing that this is important has changed, right? So they are recognizing the importance and they are taking the decision. So we have definitely added new clients even during the pandemic. That doesn't say that there is not pressure from existing clients, and so that of course is there. That their existing clients were in different kinds of pressures of their own, so we need to be able to respond to them in different ways. Now, what becomes challenging over is that we have a solution which is modular of hardware and software. And what we have been able to scale out a lot more during pandemic is different use cases where I'm using the software only, because hardware, for a variety of reasons, there is a shortage of hardware. It's a little tougher to actually put people, technicians out there to deploy the hardware solution, right? So being mindful of that, and also it's prices have risen, both of the components itself and the cost of the labor and the transportation and the extra care that is needed in transporting materials and people right now. So where possible, we are we're seeing an uptake in digital only solutions. Hardware, of course, existing clients, as they're expanding, there is some amount of hardware sales that are happening, but that's really what the reality is.
Yeah. In fact, on this very forum in the past, we started off the series, Amrita and everybody, that Satya Nadella of Microsoft said that we are doing 2 years of digital transformation in a few weeks. And just the other day, I heard somebody else, maybe the Google guy, saying that the 10-year profile of future is now with us today. What we're expecting to happen in the next 10 years is actually happening as of now. So I can quite understand the digital transformation leap that all companies, especially yours, have had to take. Just on a different note, Amrita, just to take yourself out of your own immediate operating zone and say that, do you think this is a time for businesses, tech businesses or any business, to consolidate or grow the business? Should they be a little risk averse and concentrate on their core areas, or should they go out and expand and continue to grow their businesses?
I think, Prabir, you'll have to take each business from its unique lens, right? I mean, there will definitely be disruption, and there will be businesses which may not, have the same appeal in the post-COVID scenario as they did before, right? So if you are in a business like that, then you may have to adapt and change. In our case, we are in a situation where we see that remote, contactless, like digital operations, bringing the last mile into the boardroom. These are all good things that people do want. They did want it even before, but they were unwilling to spend for it. Now there is a little more willingness to spend for it. So we do hope that it definitely grows. So we have to take calculated risks though, and calculated risks because capital is still not abundant as in the market. So there is a capital crunch. So you really need to be taking cautious risks. So I would say depending on your line of business, cautious risk is what is needed.
Oh, that's interesting to know that, because in the past we have had entrepreneurs like you who have come and said that this is the time to throw caution to the winds, because such opportunities don't come so often to entrepreneurs. Because when the world is in some kind of disruption and uncertainty, that's the time that you have to spot the opportunity and then capitalize on it before the market wakes up and attacks that same market. But I guess it, as you rightly said, it depends where your own segment, your own business is in a cycle of growth. And depending on that, you consolidate or expand. But if you are probably a little fresh off the starting block, then maybe you need to go and grab any business that you can get because you need to stay alive and relevant and not die away. So, yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, again, when I was going through your profile and the company's profile, and I spoke to some of your customers, and I believe that you have also cracked a very lucrative overseas market globally in the high-end tech segment in the USA. So, how does a small company with a modest office from Lower Parel crack a deep tech market just such as the USA in a high-end area? A lot of people might want to know about that part.
Sure. So I must say that in the early years of our journey, we wanted to be a made in India and made for India kind of a company, right? And but very soon you realize that the solutions that we are offering actually have global requirement and a global need. And one thing of making for India is that you have to create your product at a very high, higher level of hardiness, if I may say, right? Because our conditions are harsher when, we deploy both hardware and software out in the market, right? So the product is a lot more resilient because of that. So, what we have done is that last year we registered our US entity. We have a small starter team. So I'm from Carnegie Mellon. So we have a couple of grads from Carnegie Mellon who've joined us. And we are extremely engaged. So we're doing literally evening shifts on many days to either talk with clients or do exploratory conversations or business development or sort of engaging with them. So we have a few early clients now in the US. We also have channel partners now in South America and in the Middle East. And again, the thing with channel partners is that initially we had experimented with smaller, standalone channel partners, and we realized that they may not have the wherewithal or the full spectrum of skills needed to communicate what needs to be communicated. So going with complementary channel partners who bring in a depth of market expertise and market linkages, but don't have products which compete with us, but are willing to understand what we are doing and how that's applicable to their clients, is the way that we are choosing in South America and in the Middle East. And then in the US, before COVID, our plan was that we were every couple of months we would go and spend time on the ground over there, because that's really the way to operate. We might still have to do that starting in a couple of months and make that a regular pattern. During the crisis, obviously everybody has been very mindful of it, and people are open to transacting and conversing over a variety of online platforms, which is what we've been doing.
Yeah, it's really impressive how Gaia has cracked the healthcare segment in the US, especially high-end hospitals. And with your solution, US is no foreigner to high tech, and the availability of tech in and around where your clients are easily available. So I'm sure the fact that they're taking solutions from a company far away is really a credit to you and your team. You yourself come from a technology background. You have a BTech from IIT, you have an MS, and you also have a master's in business administration. So switching slightly to technology and end user benefit, as the world goes remote, as you yourself have said, and contactless and telepresence, what opportunities do you particularly see, and what are the trends, number one, and what opportunities do you see in technology like analytics or customer feedback, etc.? Would you like to kind of talk a bit about trends and opportunities that you see? And if you have some slides, that would be great too.
Sure.
help the audience understand where you're coming from.
Sure. So if I can have access to showing my screen, then I will actually show you a couple of slides about the trends that are shaping, like the tech trends which are shaping industry right now. Megha, could you help me to share my screen?
We are doing.
Okay.
So
Yeah, screen share.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. So what we are seeing is that the world around us is giving out sensory information of all kinds, which can be captured, which is already being captured by systems that companies and businesses have, but increasingly by different kinds of sensors. And this is where the whole Internet of Things comes in, where we all have devices which are either personal devices or devices, sensors which are put in our business environment. A camera is a sensor, a phone can be a sensor, and there are specific other kinds of instruments which allow us to measure what's happening in the world around us, right? And then there is also a lot of latent knowledge that users, operators of the space carry. So the whole idea is, how do you bring data from the world around us? How do you make meaning of it? And how do you then use it for the benefit of the world? So, right. So if I see and it works both at a city and a nation scenario, and it also works in a business scenario. So I'll give you one example of what happens in, let's say, a nation and an international scenario. And we've all seen these examples of, let's say, a security threat event or a terror attack that happens somewhere, someplace around the world. And very quickly, governments and the police forces are able to piece together information, first in one city, then from across different cities, then from across countries, to figure out what happened, why it happened, what was the trail of people, what was the trail of events and incidents, and how is that happening? Because in many cases we are putting in these security and surveillance cameras, these CCTV cameras, and in India through smart cities, again, that's been a huge effort in the last few years to put in CCTV cameras in different places. And the whole idea is that when you have in these sensors, and specifically in this case of security, you're being able to analyze CCTV cameras. There is databases looking at what is called people of interest, people who might be of threat, and being able to track their movement as they come into a camera. So there's a lot of intelligence and analytics built into it, so that if a known person who has been named by any authority in any country comes in front of a camera in a third country, then the camera is able to identify if the databases are shared. And now increasingly, so there is the camera, but then there is what is interconnected. The camera is a discrete element. What ends up being interconnected is the entire system behind it, the platform behind it, which has the analytics. It has the AI algorithms. It has the interoperable databases and so on. The same thing we see in enterprises. So in enterprises, when we started first seeing the rise of IoT and of sensors, it was for standalone applications. The next phase was how do we connect the data that is coming from these sensors to the enterprise systems itself? How do we connect it with the ERP? How do we connect it with the CRM system? Then came the effort of okay, we have the standalone data, but what does it mean in the context of all of the other data that I have in our system? And Gartner had released a report last year, which and SAS which was talking about the organizational data that any company collects. whether it is about the product, whether it is about the customer and transactions and operational data. 98% of the data that is captured in and by a company is actually not used. It's not used because it's all in different systems. Now, if you interconnect some of those systems and you bring in the sensor data and you try to make sense out of it, there is a lot more of correlations and patterns that you can see about the performance of your own business, about how customers want certain things, don't want certain things, what are the location-based parameters and trends and changes that you're seeing in demand, in supply, in your performance of different people, and so on. And so there's a lot of information that we can get. And then finally, the whole idea is that we have operations which run across multiple locations, multiple stores, multiple sites, multiple factories, multiple buildings. And how do we bring all of them together onto one common platform so that even if our edge devices, the hardware is discrete and at the site location, the data and the analytics and the visualization and the information and insights that we get out of it is all integrated, it is seamless, and we are able to look at the entire organization in one in a snapshot, and we're able to manage the operations better. Right? That really is the goal and the dream now. So if we look today in terms of trends, there are many different ways in which data comes from people, from processes, from the equipment. Data can come from sensors. There's very many forms of digital data that is already being captured. And then there is the audiovisual data. The data can be standalone. It can be embedded in a stream, and it can be integrated with other data streams. Once you bring the data from different sources, you have to do what is called data fusion, which means that you need to merge the data. You need to help cleanse it. You need to help see what how it can be placed together for analysis. Then comes analysis of different kinds. There is a set of analysis that is increasingly happening at the edge because you don't want to transmit all the data all the time to the cloud. So if you have some intelligence that can be built at the edge itself, then you know what to transmit. But once you have data in the cloud, then you apply more like artificial intelligence and machine learning and deep learning algorithms, so that you're able to see the trends and the patterns and make predictions of what might happen in the future. And then finally, we have to look at data as a service, so that we're able to help the business create or disrupt how they run and operate their own their own landscape or their own ecosystem. And if it's it's being used in many different ways, you can look at the government to citizen services in many different ways. We're bringing in a lot of IoT and analytics in that spectrum. Government of India is doing many different projects in a variety of fields here. There is a lot of governance monitoring, both from the enterprise space and from the government space, because there is an ecosystem of third-party providers that most companies use. So how do you ensure that their performance are up to the mark and up to the service levels that are being promised? And how do you measure the experience of the quality of that performance? There's a lot of ways in which analytics and IoT is being used for that. There's the whole idea of intelligent edge, as I was mentioning, that there is an analysis that happens at the edge itself, so that everything doesn't get transmitted. And there is the concept of the intelligent mesh, where many different things get connected. So for example, if you look at any toll road, right, there is many different things which are connecting. You have the car database, the Vahan database of the government, which tracks information about your car. You have the banking system, so there is the banking system which is associated with the tollway, and then there is your own payment gateway from your bank or from your wallet, which is being connected. There is the camera or the sensors which are there at the as you pass through a toll gate, which senses that it is your car. It ties it back, identifies and authenticates your car, does the financial transaction, allows the gate to rise automatically, and allows you to move out. So there's many different like edge and cloud devices that come into play when you're building a like a toll gateway solution, right? And similarly, people are increasingly looking at solutions rather than a point to point system. Now, there are many different ways in which people can interact with the devices. So the devices, like the sensors, they measure the information, but increasingly, because a phone can also be an IoT device, there are many different ways in which you're able to get user data through touch screens. You're able to talk. So there's a lot more, and especially in the contactless world, there will be a lot more voice-based technologies that we would look at. And then comes the whole idea of how do you increase the adoption of this technology? If the users of your system, which might be let's say in our case, the operators of any facility, the operators of the operations managers in a company, if they have to use it, right, then the system needs to be not just functional, but it needs to have the form factor which allows people to interact with it. It's easy to use, it's contextual, it allows people to collaborate. There is many different ways in which information comes in. You can engage and have conversations. So there are many different things that are a part of it. And if it is designed well, then it is adopted more, and then it becomes really useful, right? A system is as useful as the number of people using it. So how do you increase that? It depends on design. And then every aspect of things that I talked about, there is a lot of innovation that's happening across the board, from sensors to the devices to communication protocols to the application platforms to the analytics to the interfaces. And then comes the last point about having any kind of a data. How do you secure it? Is it private? So both privacy and security are huge concerns, when we are working with data of any kind, whether it is company data, like channel partner data and so on. So we need to be really mindful of these factors as well, right? So in a nutshell, these are some of the trends, Probir, that we're seeing in the industry right now, and that's what's shaping the business landscape.
Yeah, it's Amrita, this is like a crash course and masterclass in the future of data. That's a good terminology, but I really liked what you talked about: touch, tap, talk, and you might want to add one more T, is tell, because data tells. So once you're done, you can call it the 4T model. So given these 4Ts, how do you think you can bring digitization to small medium businesses, especially for the last mile? A lot of talk is going on that MSMEs tomorrow 2.0 have to digitize the last mile. So I'm sure in your portfolio of products and services and solutions, you have a lot of stuff which can help SMBs digitize. So can you just in a few words describe how will you take this to MSMEs and help them in their own needs and requirements?
Sure. So as I mentioned at the start, Probir, we do have MSME and SMB clients, and we are helping them in two different ways, right? So traditionally, we were already helping them look at the site operations by instrumenting the sites and helping them with the data operations and at the site. But increasingly, what we are finding is that there is a conversation around how do you manage your entire supply chain and your the channel partners and your go-to-market strategy. And while let's say in a bank or a scenario, digitalization came earlier. In many B2B companies, that digitalization had not happened and it was ripe for it, right? So many of them have an ERP system, which is a standalone system to monitor all your procure to pay cycles, right? But your channel management, for both sales and service, is something where it was very manual, it was hands-on, it was face-to-face, and there was a whole from the area-wide channel partners going down to the channel managers who actually meet the clients and so on, and then you have your own sales team feet on street who are meeting clients, right? So all of this was not digitalized, and that's where we have found that some of our clients have come back to us, and we are helping them because what we do, if you look at the smart operations that we manage, right? It has two parts. One part is around the connected site. The other part is around the connected workforce, right? And the connected workforce in our scenario is all distributed. And the same thing is happening in the sales and service channels of B2B companies, that these are distributed sales forces. They may be in-house or outsourced. And they were all on a very manual mode of operation. So how do you bring them onto, how do you digitalize them? How do you create engagement with the customer digitally? How do you capture the data from your clients digitally? How do you ensure that your the sales and the trouble ticketing and the issue management process happens more seamlessly? How do you get new requests? And in any let's say a B2B manufacturing scenario, the clients that we have, if they are manufacturing OEMs to other manufacturers, there is a lot of customizations that they do for different clients, right? So there is a constant need for being constantly in touch with their clients to understand, okay, for this production line, I need this customization. For that production line, I need that customization. So there's a lot of back and forth. So that engagement can all be brought online, which is what we are helping our clients with right now. Right? So one was on the connected site, and now increasingly on the connected workforce in the sales and service stream as well.
Yeah. So there is clearly a value proposition for small, medium businesses, as I can, if I was a SMB owner and I'm listening to this, I definitely will, three things strike me where possibly I might say, oh, okay, I never thought of that. One is, how do you manage channel partners? I'm sure SMBs have channel partners. Two is, how do you manage the supply chain, which you have? Any SMB will have their own subcontractors and suppliers and vendors. And third is on the marketing side, how do I manage the sales redistribution method and the partners and the channels, so that all three are seamless and connected sites and smart workflow are talking to each other. So there's not silos and compartments and no communication. So what you help to do is help a small business right from the front end, issue management, trouble ticketing, bespoking for his immediate requirements, passing it down to the channel partners, and then configuring that at your end for solution, and then getting just in time or whatever supply into it. I feel there's a huge fit into last mile digitization for SMBs. These are three clear buckets and with a common archway, if I may say so, which brings all these three together. So that really brings me to another question, which probably is very different to what I've been asking you till now. But again, going back to the first question of as an entrepreneur, where you get, as you said, it's very exciting, though there are risks. You have won the NASSCOM Top 50 Tech Startups Award, amongst many others. So, which is very creditable. So, what tips can you give to other wannabe early stage entrepreneurs on how to bootstrap and how to grow a tech-driven business? If you have some do's and don'ts, I think it will be very useful, because you are not a new kid on the block. You have gone through trial and tribulation. So anything that you can share with the audience would be of utmost use to them also.
Sure. So you rightly said, Prabir, we've won multiple awards along the way. And if we could bucket the awards, there have been awards on innovation, there have been awards on quality, and there have been awards on scale. So, for example, some of the earlier awards were on, let's say, Qualcomm Design in India, or a Microsoft accelerator and the Microsoft machine learning lab, where these were all product related awards that we received. We're also a part of the ST Microelectronics startup labs. Then came the Quality Council of India, the Design Council of India, those awards which are really looking at quality in product or quality in design or quality of impact that we were having in the ecosystem. And then NASSCOM and India Emerge 20 is really that we've been able to take the solutions and somewhat scale them to clients. And it's so it's a NASSCOM is a product award, right? But it's a product award for a product that's sort of stabilized and scaled up a little bit. And there's a journey to arrive at that. And the journey has been like any journey of innovation. It's always iterative, right? You always you create something, you put it out in the field, you see how the environment is reacting with your product, and you come back and you iterate and you fix, and then you take it out again. So that's a part of product development when you're building things out, and that does take some time. One of the other things that we always have been very conscious of is that we are building India relevant products, right? At least in the initial part of our journey, because we were building India relevant products, we had to be very value conscious, right? So very cost conscious. And we also had to be very focused on the ruggedness and the resilience of the product, right? Because the way it gets used in an Indian environment, both hardware and software, it just needs to be a lot more resilient. It needs to be simpler. So when I say I'm bringing operations from the last mile to the boardroom, while my analytics needs to be very beautiful so that the chairman loves it, right? And we have all kinds of slices, dices, comparatives, visualizations inbuilt in at the dashboard level. At the product level, at the last mile, whether it's a screen or a product hardware that last mile user is interacting with, people with very limited education need to be able to interact with the system to input the data, or the hardware needs to be strong enough so that it withstands the usual challenges that we have in India. And the usual challenges are power disruptions, network disruptions, heat, dust, the temperature variation. So there's a lot of last mile challenges that you need to overcome when you're creating solutions from an India context, right? And all of these are good principles because it makes you think for the edge, for the extreme boundary conditions, and design for those. And then overall it helps with the resilience of the product itself. And what we find is that when you go to global markets, right? Yes, the last mile person over there may have an iPhone and not a cheap feature phone that we might expect with the last mile person in India, but their level of tech savviness is no different. Their fear of technology is no different at the last mile, right? So if you've built your product to be user friendly and intuitive enough so that the fear is removed, then it actually carries forward in different markets. It might just be yeah. So
Wonderful.
I think yeah, that's from a product perspective, and obviously from a business perspective, Probir, you're right. We have bootstrapped, and I think what we've been conscious of is that we wanted to get clients and co-create with clients, right? And that helps us because we have real customers and real problems that we've always worked on, which means that there has been some revenue that keeps coming in from the clients. So you can bootstrap because you have clients supporting you, and then through that, you're able to grow, and that's really been the way we've approached it, thus far.
Yeah, I can see that. Normally people don't associate small medium businesses with high-end technology solutions and high-end applications. But as I can see it is that you use four different words. One is real value to the local conditions. Second is resilience of your product, robustness. Third was your relevant to the owners and the managers. The data has to be contextual. So I think all that you've done is catering to your audiences here is probably what we are all talking about. Be vocal about local. And I think when they use these slogans, it need not be just a slogan. It actually would mean those elements of quality that you have mentioned, which will stand global boundary conditions, stress testing. And that's why I guess you have got some of these clients overseas. So be that as it may, I want to ask you one last question before I throw open the questions to the audience. And maybe Amrita, you might want to ask me a counter question. But again, you have 7 patents in your name in semiconductors. Now tell me one thing: why isn't India got a semiconductor base or semiconductor DNA? Why are we not? We have not for the want of wanting it, but why even in SMT, surface mounted, we have not got any competency. We're importing chips. We're working way down the value chain. And you might find that all the engineers at Pentium, at Intel and Qualcomm and Motorola were all Indians. But where is that Indian manufacturing of high-end chips like Taiwan or maybe even Malaysia or USA or UK now? So I have always wondered about this. So maybe you will have the right answer for this.
So first, let me acknowledge the challenge, Probir. Even as an entrepreneur, we have hardware which is our own, but the components are all imported, right? So it's our design and we are manufacturing it, but many of the ingredient parts we need to import. And I can see the tolerance levels of the imported parts versus the tolerance levels of the Indian parts that we source, and the quality can be different, right? So that brings us to the real challenge, why are we not being able to do it? And if you see, for example, in auto, right? In auto, if you're looking at the, either the Chennai is now a hub, right? If you're looking at design, or if you're looking at the analytics and that goes into these smart cars and so on, there's a lot that is happening out of India. But at the chip level, at the component level, at the actual electronics level, it's been a challenge. And the challenge comes from it's multifold. First is and sometimes it's chicken and egg, right? It requires teams, technicians, not just engineers, but a whole stream of technicians and engineers who are very well trained. They are very quality conscious, and we are talking of tolerances of faults to the rate of 1 ppm, right? 1 part per million kind of 2 parts per million kind of things going wrong, versus see, we have our own design and we are doing contract manufacturing through some of the large Indian companies and public sector and private sector enterprises in manufacturing, who then assemble it for us. And my fault rate can be extremely high, and there is no recourse as that I can have, because that's the expected fault rate, right? So I, as a business, have to bear that expense. So one is that the quality consciousness and the training, and along with it, a fab unit has
Very expensive.
the cost of it, right? The capital requirement for setting up, the infrastructure required is immense, right? You're really talking of several hundreds of millions of dollars for setting up one large fabrication unit, and we really haven't had those kinds of indigenous businesses setting that up yet.
Right.
So yeah. So it's a two-sided problem, both capital and talent and mindset. And
Yeah,
I think,
I can see that. Yeah, that I used to have arguments with my friends in Intel that, why don't you're taking the plant to Vietnam, you're taking the plant to Penang. Why aren't you creating a plant in Chandigarh or wherever the water is
yeah,
abundant and the ppm in the air is
yeah,
less, like Nasik or something.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, I think. But the other thing, Amrita, is that your capex on a fab plant is $3 or $4 billion, and the chip's life is 3 to 4 years. So you have to keep investing in that, and so that's not good economics, and therefore the US lost out in the original chip and semiconductors because nobody was willing to put that kind of capital down. And the Chinese and the Taiwanese and the others were ready to do that. Now,
Uh,
hopefully, that pendulum is swinging.
no,
I don't know, maybe.
Probir, in
Yeah.
fact, I will contradict you because I was looking
Oh,
at
great.
the statistics for something else just recently, just last week, in fact. And so when I had started working, right, like, when I graduated out of Berkeley, at that point of time, there had been a downturn in the semiconductor industry. And that had been, and this is like a really ancient history for people of today, but there's something called DRAMs, and Japan, which had tooled and invested in those technologies, in the 70s and the 80s, was the market leader. And when the demand for personal electronics increased, and when the demand for personal computers increased, these were things these are your storage devices, which are there in every personal equipment or personal computer, and there was a huge demand for these, and Japan came in. And at that time, the US semiconductor industry formed Sematech. And so when I was there, this the association had just formed, and there was a lot of incentives and impetus given to the US semiconductor manufacturing.
Right.
As of now, the statistics is that US has more than 50% of the market share. So about 52% of the global market share of integrated circuit chips market. These are the higher end, not the low cost, your like the storage devices and so on, but the high end, IC chips. And of that, 50% is manufactured in fabs on US soil. So you look
That's
at
important.
Arizona, Washington, Oregon, Texas, California. There's a whole bunch of states in the west coast of the US, which had really invested in all of this, and they continue to manufacture out of there.
No, that's good to hear, because I hope then they don't have to depend on Huawei and then in turn on Chinese made chipsets to power their 5G networks as and when it becomes available. So that's interesting to know. So Amrita, I'll be coming to the close. Any questions that you might like to ask me, and you may have in mind, so that it's really seen as a fireside chat and not one way.
Absolutely, Prabir. So, I mean, you've been really instrumental in significantly, scaling up your company and, taking it global into many, many countries. So, tell us a little bit about, how can other companies learn from your experience of scale, of achieving scale, and of achieving, global scale of the kind that you have reached?
Yes, it's always good to say that sometimes luck is also important, number one, and conditions. But having said that, I think, and you know that also, that we have been very focused over the last 10 years in whatever we do. If we have a single line of product and it's, say, B2B as a payment processor in ARAP, accounts receivables and payables, and we manage the entire supply chain of payments and processing, then we only continuously keep refining that to a level where it to a fine art, and not get distracted with many other interesting and flavor of the month issues that come up in this 10-year cycle. For example, we started off as a B2C company, and we wanted to be a part of the mobile banking, wallet, mobile POS, etc. Remittance, a product we had for remittance, for domestic remittance. But we found it on the retail side of payments, it was a difficult value proposition. There were too many people coming in. and 3, the people coming in had a lot of capital at their disposal. But when you're small and you're capital constrained, like you are, and we all are capital constrained, relation to where we want to be or what we could do, then you have to just take a small thin slice and continuously work on that day in and day out. And at some point of that, nobody else will be able to do what you do better than what you are doing. And so anytime someone needs that sliver of service or that stack or that container, then perforce, you have something which is really valuable to them and can solve their problem, and also is flexible enough for them to adapt and bespoke to their own requirements, whether it's India or South Asia or Middle East or North America or Europe or Latin America. The chassis of that is so well built that you can always add layers and modules on that, bolt them on, so that that gives the unique customization for that particular client in that particular part of the world with that particular regulatory system or workflow system. So you don't have to reinvent it and go there and start from scratch. You come with 80, 90%, and you just patch on their immediate requirements. And your platform is so flexible, you can do that in weeks and on the fly. And you can deploy it also as equal speed. That's number one. And number two, I think the pricing also is important, and how you enter new markets and who you work with in the new markets. I think these are the two key factors which I think probably has helped us to grow. We would have liked to grow much faster, but payments is a very difficult space. Yes, it's the flavor of month and it's talk of the town. It sounds very sexy, but it's a very tough space. And the best way to handle it is to continuously do what you're good at, doing it in and out every day, just that single one thing. So if you were doing 5 things, 6 things, 7 things, just breeze it into one thing and constantly keep lubricating that and fine tuning that. And then people want you for that particular USP. They like you for your overall knowledge, your understanding of the payments value chain, your journey across the entire value chain. But they say, listen, at the end of the day, we want this particular thing which is very relevant to us. I think that is key, and of course, resilience and hanging in there is very important, and going through the ups and downs. I think this basically has been a team effort. Everybody has had to, bite the bullet when times are tough, and we have gone through our ups and downs. So it's not an individual only approach. It's, I guess, the entire team which makes it happen. And you have done the same thing, or rather doing the whole same thing. There is no churn and there's no attrition. It's a very cohesive approach, and everybody's on board. Everybody's a stakeholder. So they want to reach the common goal. So it's a lot about human relations and human focus also, I feel, and that is not given too much of importance somehow, but I feel it's very important.
And has COVID-19 changed the scenario for you? And you mentioned something about channel partners, and any lessons on how to identify who's the correct partner in a new country or a new geography?
Yeah, I think there's been that question will have to have a yes and no answer, because what, as you yourself said, because of the emphasis on remote, contactless, all end electronic, digital, encryption, telepresence, all that, if you add it together, then a CFO would like to be able to manage his entire company's finances from the safety of his desktop at home, without having to say, I can't do this and I can't do that because I can't get to my data, I can't get to my systems, I can't get to my workflow in the office. So that CXO level people immediately see that this is a low cost method of continuing your work, B, much more operationally efficient, C, you can do it remotely, and it has all the end-to-end features which enables you to do it. So I think initially there might have been a bump, but that has forced companies to now look at electronic systems much more seriously, as you yourself have said, that they said this is not a nice to have anymore. This is something we must have, and this is not a business continuity program fallback. This is our core way we are going to work from now on. So that mindset shift, Amrita, and that behavioral change is what is really helping companies like us and even you guys to move ahead. I think that takes time. Otherwise, it takes 5, 6 years for you to adapt and behaviors to change. People, younger people, to come in with a new mindset, and so that has been crunched to few weeks. I always say a few hours. So, and I think that that is a huge inflection point for us. So demonetization was one, and probably this one is the second one.
And channel
Thanks a
partners?
lot, Amrita.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So, Sanjeev, handing back to you for answering, taking any questions from your esteemed participants, either for you or Amrita or me.
Yes, yes. I'll be just means inviting the participants to ask some questions. I had already posted on the chat box. Yeah, wonderful discussion, Amrita and Pravesh. Now the floor is open for means question answer session. All the participants are requested to just come up with your question so that you can get benefited with the experts. Now, one question from me, if the when participants are not ready with the question, as I have already mentioned, MSMEs are the backbone of our economy, and they contribute 30% to the GDP and generating 70 to 80% of the employment. And micro, whenever we are talking about the micro, having turnover less than 5 crores. So Amrita, what kind of affordable solution to that so that they can scale their business in this COVID-19? As far as research is concerned, one layer of the MSME, they will be vanished, that will be deleted, or they cannot sustain in this COVID-19 pandemic. Yes.
Yeah, so I think definitely sustenance is a big challenge, right? And I know there are many, and you would know better than me, Dr. Nayak, that there have been many policies that have been announced in the last few months in terms of specific help for MSME companies. But most companies that I know have not been really able to access that help because the last mile intermediaries in the financial system have really not implemented or executed on those policy statements. So while there are new avenues of capital and loans being available, there is quite a few people who have not really been able to access it, and even loan moratoriums and things like that. It's not seamless, right? So I will first let me just acknowledge that it has been a challenge. There have been many delegations that have gone and spoken to different people within the government, and I'm sure you would have also spoken to them.
Yes.
So that for sure is a challenge. I think the question comes, I mean, you have to survive, right? And also, you have to see, are you in an area where, what do you need to fit in this new post-COVID scenario, right? And there were some, studies which were done across the board, by BCG and Deloitte and EY, which were looking at industries which, will open up in the medium term, and industries that will, open up in, a little later. So it's being mindful of that and trying to see, okay, where do I fit in? Who do I supply to? For example, I mean, we have clients who are providers in, let's say, in the manufacturing space or in the textile space and so on. And again, I mean, some of those, if you're in any way, related to essential services, if you can any way digitalize any part of your supply chain to go direct to market or direct to your consumer, direct to your B2B client, then that helps you because, everybody around the world wants to do business, right? And everybody is hamstrung by the fact that supply chains are choked, capital is less, demand is low, right? So how do you engage with people and how do you make sure that you get your message across to people? Supply chains notwithstanding, right? There's a physical movement of goods which is getting restricted or has been restricted, and that's one part of the story. But the other part of the story is, can you use technology to either communicate better with your people or manage your production environment better, right? So that you can actually produce the products which are required to deliver to your customers. That's what you have to see, and ensure that you're able to make that journey and make that leap and sort of survive to then thrive.
Thank
Need
you.
any comments from you in that space?
I think so. We don't have any questions.
No, I don't have any comment. I think, you've quite of spelt it out quite succinctly and in a very nice, short manner. Yes, I think what Sanjeev is also saying is that this technology and digital transformation word should not be only something which applies to large enterprises, MNC companies, large government organizations. I think the time has come, Sanjeev, and that today 99% of all businesses as MSME, a large part of MSME business is now within the micro MSME. So it's time digital transformation and technology finds use case in this large long tail of 63 million small businesses, which are, as Sanjeev said, are 30 or 40% or 50% of GDP, 30% of uh, manufacturing, etc. So I think they really need it. If the backbone of your country is MSME, where it contributes the most to GDP, most to exports, most to manufacturing, then isn't it logical that technology and digital transformation should, of course, apply to that? Because only 10% is formal sector and these large companies, which probably altogether employ 10 million people. But the rest of the economy is as fueled by over 100 million people working in their own self-employed and in these MSMEs, which is 111 million people. So I think it's good that you have kind of, being an MSME, you yourself will understand that it's time to take technology to the masses. And the masses
Yes.
means not at the UNI level, but at the most basic lowest common denominator of economy and generation of GDP.
Yeah, affordable government solution like using IoT or any other technological innovation we can have, so that we can, the MSMEs or the micro one, we are just talking about micro one can get it. That is recently we have already breached that startup and MSME. So startups, they are just providing solution to the MSME so that is scaling their business. One dhaba was there. I have already spoken to Praveer that we have used that IoT technology. They have scaled their business within 1 lakh rupees, like that. That kind of technological innovation we can have, so that we can provide to the micro, that constitutes more than 95%, and 99% MSME are there after redefinition or reclassification of MSME government.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think that will be good. Sanjeev, if we can create a IoT, some kind of focus in the WASME, that will be helpful.
Any question from a participant?
Dr. Sanjeev, can I ask one question?
Yes, you can.
Mr. Praveer, it's Peter here. Hi, how are you all?
Fine,
thanks,
fine.
Amrita, for your wonderful speech.
Peter,
Praveer,
from Australia. He is from Australia.
Yeah, I'm speaking from Sydney. What sort of a level of penetration e-growth will take place in India? Like, we understand that India has got a huge urban as well as rural population. Urban is fine, but once it leaves urban, what depth it will go into the rural sector as an means e-commerce is fine, like it's taking place like Amazon, eBay, and all. Like I think it's penetrating into India, but it's like in the big cities. Yes, it will take a shape. It will go into, and it will do its own business. But once the big cities get saturated, how far you feel it will start penetrating into the rural areas?
I think the answer to that question is already you have answered that. You're absolutely right that now the next phase of growth of e-commerce and digital technology will have to be in the tier 2, tier 3 cities and in the rural India. And I think what COVID has done is that urban audiences already been doing e-commerce and online for a long time, so they are not digitally uh, unknown to that. But now the next burst of traffic of Amazon, Flipkart, Paytm is actually coming from smaller cities and from the rural areas, because they have had no option, so they have had to learn to start doing things electronically. So the surge and the boom, whether even Swiggy and Zomato, a lot of traffic is coming from rural areas, not just from 5 urban cities. So even at that level of food delivery, groceries, vegetables and fruits, obviously traditional e-commerce is the next burst of demand is coming from rural areas. So I think what this probably COVID has done, as I said in the beginning, is that what should have happened in 2 years or 10 years, slowly the adoption of technology has come much faster, so that everybody has had to perforce adapt themselves to using technology, using their phones and ordering things on the phone, or doing their payments, or getting the information and the news all on the phone. And this is a good exogenous shock, as they call it, and which will be a shape shifting change in India. I think the next burst of growth will come from India. I mean, rural India. But even in the SMB space, there is Bharat Mart has come, Gems has come. These are all large marketplaces which is supposed to cut across the country, that any vendor, supplier, merchant, manufacturer, business can be a part of this giant electronic marketplace. And this is again probably going to give that also a boost, that more people will have to adopt to joining a large marketplace, so that they can create new markets, deliver their goods beyond their immediate areas. So I think yes, this is a good inflection point for India to go digital and in and around the rural and tier 2, tier 3 cities.
Thank you for that. One more, if it's okay. Can I, Dr. Sanjeev,
Yes.
can I ask one more, or I'm taking too much of time?
No, you can.
Yeah, considering we are as you rightly said, that it's penetrating into a tier 2 and tier 3 level. But at the same time, means we are trying to anticipate that everything will go electronically and everything will start coming into more into the e-commerce business. But like I myself, I'm from Mumbai, and we all know that there are heaps of people who are shop owners. So when you start, when we are getting a confidence of e-commerce penetrating into the tier 2 and tier 3 level, how do we have on the other end, we have got a lot of shopkeepers, right? Who their livelihoods depend upon day-to-day selling.
Absolutely.
How do we defend that sort of a concept? Like e-commerce trying to penetrate too much deep, and then we have got our own shopkeepers who have been having their business for years, generation after generation, How do you defend that sort of a concept?
I think I'll pass that question to Amrita so that we get a fresh perspective rather than Amrita.
Yeah. Sorry. So you're asking about generational.
He's asking, what about the shopkeepers and retail? How will they defend themselves if everything goes e-commerce? What happens to
But
the?
in fact, what's happening is that we want hyperlocal, and hyperlocal is not your e-commerce provider. And what the biggest disruption actually in that case has been platforms, fintechs, which are startups which are providing softwares to the kirana shops to very quickly bring their entire inventory on board, very quickly help them with digital payments. And we don't want to step out to a large okay, so there are limitations to e-commerce in the sense that sometimes it's the time to delivery, sometimes it's stock outs and so on that we have been facing, right? So in contrast, if you look at your local, especially in the essentials category, there's a lot of good business that has happened in the last 3 to 4 months in digitalizing the kiranas and bringing them on board. And I know, I mean, and I'm not even talking about GeoMart. I'm talking of other other platforms which are there, which are enabling this last mile transition, and there are many of them, many startups which are there.
Okay, thank you.
And hyperlocal really is the big word.
Yeah.
We want safe, right? We want safe products.
Yeah. Thanks, Amrita. Thanks, Rohit. Thanks, Dr. Sanjeev.
Thanks.
I
would just I would just request Megha for vote of thanks because we are going out of time. Yeah. Thank you, Pravesh and Amrita. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I, on behalf of World Association for Small and Medium Enterprises, it's a great honor to propose the vote of thanks to all guest speakers, participants, and WASME team. I would like to thank our distinguished speaker, Ms. Amrita Chaudhary, co-founder, director, GIAI, for making excellent presentation and making this webinar interesting and meaningful. I would like to express our profound gratitude to Mr. Prabir Roy, Senior Advisor WASME, for his presence in this webinar. I would also like to thank our Secretary General WASME, Dr. G.P. Agarwal, and Executive Secretary, Dr. Sanjeev Laik WASME, for your support and guidance. Once again, thank you all of you for making this webinar successful with your contribution. Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.